All right, cool. Awesome. Let's get started. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. Hopefully you all found parking. All right. Anybody have issues with parking? No? Good? Cool. So I see a lot of faces here for the first time, so thank you. We hold this meetup every month, once a month. We already have the one scheduled for next month. It is up on the website. It's going to be about creating an in-browser video synthesizer. So it's already posted. If you all want to RSVP, just so we know how many people to expect so we can get food. Speaking of food, we want to thank CNC Machines, our sponsor for food. Scott, the speaker for tonight, works for CNC Machines. We also have John here at the front, so if you guys want to talk about the company, you can reach out to them. I also want to thank SitePlan for hosting us on their amazing office. And let me pull up a little bit about SitePlan over here. So, Chris can talk about it.
So I'm Chris Cremines, Director of Engineering here at SitePlan. We're really excited to have OrlandoJS back yet again. It's been really cool to continually host more meetups every single month. So I think we're up to 4 now, so it's been really awesome to give back to the community for this space that's been a big history in the local community. But so SitePlan is a software as a service company that kind of deals in the multifamily property space. So think maintenance and resident service solutions for apartment complexes. So obviously you see some hiring slides up here. Probably need to update those a little bit. We are in a bit of a hiring frenzy. In the last month, we've hired a number of developers, and we're still looking for positions. So if you or anybody you know is interested in iOS development for native apps, native Android development, backend development, doing Java, Ruby, AWS stack, definitely hit us up after the meetup or hit up the website. So thanks for being here, and enjoy the talk.
Thanks, guys. Also, other meetups in town. We have the Orlando Devs meetup. The next one is scheduled for May 6th. I believe it's also here at the office, right? So there you go. That's what you get for having an awesome office, man. And also Front-End Orlando / CodePen meetup organized by David. Is that still happening? Do we have one scheduled yet?
Not this month.
Okay.
Maybe next month.
Okay, so if you all want to stay in the loop, just join the meetup. That's the easiest way to stay in the loop for all the events. But we also have Dwayne, I believe. Are you responsible for this? Yeah. Okay, cool. So he is helping us out by putting together this awesome website that is actually working now. So, do you have a newsletter too? No? So, Dwayne, he's the API wizard, so he was able to plug in a bunch of APIs to this website. So, if you go to otech.events, it's going to list all the upcoming meetups. Yep, so you can get a glimpse of all the meetups that are happening in Orlando, which is a lot.
Add out of the groups there, so if you want to see the groups that are pulling from. And if I'm missing any, just let me know.
Oh, cool.
Wow.
Here's all the list.
Yes,
man. Good job.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's about it. Is anybody here hiring other than SitePlan? You want to talk a little bit?
Well, I work at a place called Capco, where we're kind of like a consulting firm for financial institutions. So banks or whoever deal in money come to us with their digital problems, and we help solve it in any way that we can. And so we're looking front end, back end, so like Java or any of that stuff, just let me know. And DevOps, another good one. So anyway, so cool.
Awesome. And after Scott's talk, we're going to be opening up the floor for lightning talk. So if anybody has any cool project that they're working on, or if you've come across a cool blog post or a cool library, or like if you have a problem and you're looking for a solution, come here, present. You don't even have to have slides. Let's just try to keep it short, kind of under 5 minutes or so. But yeah, lightning talks, anybody and everybody's welcome to present. And it's also a great way to maybe like test the waters if you're going for like a longer type talk and you don't have that put together yet, just do a lightning talk, a couple minutes. It's a good way to just get started. I think that's it. So Scott, you ready?
Sure.
Let's do it, man. So Scott's going to be talking about React hooks.
Thank you for plugging my dongle.
Is it still working? Hope so.
I hope so too.
There you go.
All right, good evening, everybody. How are we doing? My name's Scott May. I figure I'll introduce myself. I went to the UCF Coding Boot Camp a little while ago, graduated, whatever they call that. And I really liked Angular when it came out. And then I started getting into React. That's what we learned in the boot camp. And I really like React. I'm also I'm a teaching assistant on udemy.com for Max Schwarzmueller. I don't know if anybody's taken any of his courses before on Udemy, but he's got 20 courses available on there. I recommend, he has a React course, I definitely recommend it. We're going to talk about hooks today. Is everybody familiar with React? Do we have any life in the building? Anybody? Anything? There we go. We got it. So hooks is, well, over a year ago, Dan Abramov, who is React Jesus, he did a talk introducing hooks and the idea of kind of having a new state and life cycle control of your application. And what is a hook is the number one question. Hooks are functions that allow you to use state and life cycle features of components. This is from the React docs themselves. And you can easily manipulate the state of your functional components without needing to convert them into class components. So, so with use state, if you're familiar with React, as so many of you answered that you were, you'll know that usually you have a constructor, you pass props, you use super, you have this state, you use this everywhere. This is pretty much taking all of that out of the equation. So where is the state then? So basically with the hook of useState, it is localized to your component now. So you don't need to have a class at all in order to maintain your state. And I don't know if anybody's familiar with the guts under the hood about fibers and how it all runs, but that's pretty much where it actually lives, is in these fibers, which is a concept you should check out on Wikipedia. It's pretty interesting. So this is our normal stateful class component in React. And this is the constructor I was talking about with the super and the state. And if you have to use this is referring to the class component itself. This is everywhere. This dot state, this dot set state, this dot state dot name. State is everywhere. So this ends up causing some confusion, especially in your early on in your React development life, where you don't understand why you can't pass a function because you're not binding this. You don't even know how to bind this, or be using fat arrow functions. It's a very confusing setup in the beginning, in my opinion, for using the component did mount lifecycle and whatnot. Now, using a stateful functional component, which allows us to use state hook, we can now set a state without using this, and we can use the use state hook, which is destructuring the array, which gets back the actual state, and in a function to set your state, which you name on your own. So essentially, if obviously you're going to do a count, you want to set the count. You obviously want to have a naming conventions you'd like to follow yourself. But as you see, there is no more this. So now when you're on click, we don't need to bind, we don't need to do anything, we don't need to call this. You're just calling the function just like you would in any other component that you use in React that is a functional component. The use effect, with everybody's familiar with React, we know about the component did mount, the component did update, and the component will unmount. This is everything into one. as a hook, which is it's pretty impressive with the abilities that this gives you. This is in a class, you pretty much run your fetch on the did mount, and you can set your state. So you run your inside the component did mount. You want to fetch all your data. You want to set your state, and then obviously in the render method, you want to deal with you want to display your data. But inside the component did mount is where we're running this function. In our functional components, we can use this use effect hook, which is essentially the component did mount, will unmount, and in here, it does not take, it's not asynchronous. The hook is not asynchronous. So if we want to use async functions, we need to create an async function outside of the use effect hook. Otherwise, you can use the .then and promises inside the use effect hook. But here we're setting our initial state in the beginning of an empty array. And inside our use effect, which is basically component did mount, we're going to go ahead and run our get to do's function, which will fetch our data asynchronously, and we will then set the state with a set to do's function given to us by the use state hook above, and that will give us the access to the data. There's no object destructuring on the state inside the body of the function, unlike the classes where you have to deconstruct this .state if you'd like to use this .state with this .props. So also, as I mentioned, component will unmount is also in the use effect hook. So if you're going to be using event listeners, you always need to clean up your component when you are done with them. So this is with our class. Once again, this is everywhere. This update dimensions, and so essentially on the component did mount, which is the use effect we just showed. When it mounts, we're going to add the event listener to watch the window resize, which is using this update dimensions, this .update dimensions, which is bound to the class via the fat arrow function, and inside that we are this .set the state with the event. So inside here, once again, we're doing object destructuring on the state because we do not have access to those variables unless we destructure this .state, unless we spell out this .state.width, this .state.height. So also, when the component will unmount, you have to remove any event listeners that you may have, and that is where we will do so on component will unmount to remove the event listener. Now, so cleaning up is very simple inside the use effect. This is everything. This is component did unmount, should unmount, will unmount, do everything. So we're going to add the event listener immediately. But then once the component is going to be destroyed, we're going to remove the event listener by returning the function.
Is this HTML? I mean, the slides?
No, they're pictures.
Oh, it's a picture.
Don't worry, I got you. Don't worry, I got you. But yes, so that is, once again, there's no object. We already object destructure the state from the use state. We're passing it an object, which in use state, this is kind of anti-React in theory, but you should have like almost a separate use state for each item of your state. So essentially I should have a width and a set width, but I like to keep it kind of simple sometimes on easy object destructuring with that. This is the use effect with a prop change. So essentially we have the app component and we have a hello component. So with this we're going to set a state of an empty username. We're going to set the age to 0. We're passing the username and the age into the hello component. As you see, we're getting these props of name and hello, or name and age, excuse me, into the hello component. On change, we're passing the event of set username to the target value of the typing, and same with the target value of the set age. But in here, the use effect will only render when the name is changed, not when the age is changed. Because of this prop right here, this is should component update, essentially, which if you're familiar with React, that returns a boolean inside a class where you compare the previous state with the current state. So in doing so, this really makes it, as simple as possible. If name changes, this use effect will be called again. So one of my favorite hooks is the use context hook. This is really the trick. So essentially with the use state, you have stateful logic inside a single component. Use context allows you to pass state and share that stateful logic across many components as long as they're nested inside as a child. This is where I'm going to break out the HTML, and I'm going to show you, I threw an application together using hooks and using context. I'm using the use reducer hook, which is, if anybody's familiar with Redux, if I was familiar as they were React, they'll know that use reducer is essentially, that's what use state is built upon. So the use reducer takes the state and the action and updates the state and returns the state object with the updated state. So in our, you can find more about hooks, obviously, on the React website. Shocker. So here's our React app. So we have a few things. The first item to discuss via our app here is our app.js. This is obviously the entry point of our app. And if you notice, we have a theme provider wrapping the entire app.
Can you make it a little bigger? Zoom in a little bit. Perfect.
Is that better for real? Better?
More, bigger.
More, bigger?
That helps.
All right. Ruby? Okay. So in doing so, we have the theme provider. That is our main. That is the parent. That is everything. So inside this is what we're basically providing as our theme color is in the background. As you see, we have lovely Nancy Reagan telling you just say no to drugs. And our theme provider is using the use reducer function. We set the action, we set the initial state. Neutral is true. Here are our actions that our reducer that we're going to pass. If you're familiar with React, create context, you just pretty much create it with an initial state, and that creates the context. And with the theme provider, this is how you have access to the context and are able to pass the value of the provider to the children. So the theme provider is going to use the reducer, which we're passing our initial reducer that I just had, which we'll get into shortly, and the initial state into the use reducer function. That deconstructs into a state and a dispatch action. The state is obviously the state, and the dispatch will dispatch the action for the reducer to decide what the next state will be returned to you. Back to the app.js. If you notice, we have a color div inside the theme provider, and this color div is is really what our state is based upon. So our state inside the theme color provider, we have a neutral, a blood, a crip, and dead as your state. Right now, you're neutral. Obviously, we have a blood and a crip selection here as our buttons. So if I choose blood, we are going to send off an action to our theme provider, which is going to determine the action is blood, and it's going to return the updated state accordingly. It's much more red on my screen. So we now changed the theme provider. We've now made it a blood, so our state has been updated. We use the reducer to update our initial state. Neutral is now false, and blood is true. As you see, if you set blood, blood becomes true, crip is false, neutral is false. So as you see, blood is red. Now inside the app again, app.js, let me get back here. Inside app.js, if you notice, we have a gang selector, a gang image, and we have gang stats. We have inside gang selector, where'd you go? Excuse me. we actually have a provider as well, which is also using a new, this is also handling a reducer. It's a use context. It is using the reducer hook to maintain and contain the context of this new state, which is your drug money, your body count, and your arrests. It's a crossover event. It's a crossover. Once again, you have your basic reducer with your action types, which return the new state, the updated state based upon the action. And once again, we create a provider, which we pass children to. So inside our app.js, we have gang selector. So this is the exact, this is what we chose. We chose if we're a blood or a crip, which dispatches actions. If we want to leave the gang, we can leave the gang. And if we want to reincarnate the gang. So we can choose to leave the gang, and which will dispatch an action. And as you see, this dispatch the action will be leave gang, which will of course go to our gang stats provider, which will say action type leave gang. So over here, when we click to leave the gang, we dispatch an action. And now we're dead. So now we can choose to reincarnate, which will of course reset our application back to the baseline. So now we'll choose blood again. So now we look, let me reset my score there. So in here, we now have the gang provider, we have the gang stats provider, and here we're going to use two separate providers. This is that's where we get a little tricky here. Inside our so we have gang stats, gang provider. Sorry about that. Gang choices. Here we go. So once again, we can sell drugs, we can stunt, which means to be ostentatious, and we can also shoot people, because that is what gangsters do. So if you want to sell drugs, you make money. While you make money selling drugs, you get street cred. And Kanye West will say something. So we have all these different components all mashed together, but they all share the same state due to the providers, the context providers, and the use context hook, which utilizes the use reducer to maintain the overall state. So we can shoot people, we can stunt, which will spend some money, and then eventually we will hopefully get arrested. And we get arrested. We're using the great marquee tag from 1998, excuse me, using the level. So essentially now our app, we have now just come to the end, the conclusion of our game. If anybody remembers drug wars on the old scientific calculator back in the day. We now have drug money, we now have a street credit 2538. So inside we have a high score. So inside the high score JSX, we are passing in the arrests as our prop to the arrests. If you notice, our use effect will run on mount, and it will run when the arrests change. So right here, I'm gonna hit reset. Now we set the high score, okay? So now that we know that use effect runs once when it loads, like it just did, we know it checks the high score initially on load, because that's what it does, check high score. So we go check the high score. We go to local storage, we get the item, we check the high score, blah, blah, blah. We set it, So essentially, once we get arrested, if you notice, it's never gonna run again. This use effect will not run again until we are arrested. Then it will check the high score and make the change accordingly. So now we see our street cred is 3840. So now behind the scenes, we got the arrested prop passed into our high score component. And because the arrest prop changed, it's going to run the use effect again, which behind the scenes, check the high score behind it. So now when we reset it, our street cred is 3840, our high score, our arrests are up, so we already went and did everything behind the scenes. So now when the component mounts again, we have a new updated high score. So So that is triggered anytime you get it. It does nothing with the arrests. It has nothing to do, does not display the arrest, does not do anything with the data of arrests, but it is dependent on the arrests changing. So when the arrest changes, that's when the magic happens of the use effect. That's that should component update problem. So essentially it's sitting there watching the arrest the entire time, running the Boolean check of has arrest changed, has arrest not changed, and as soon as it does change, it runs the use effect again as soon as the prop changes. One of the main kind of cool things about hooks is that you can create your own custom hooks. And in doing so, we have by the way, I have a nice warning to tell you, marquee is deprecated. So don't use marquee in a real site. So I created a kind of a custom hook. It's kind of stupid, but for the point. This is our custom hook we're going to create. So we're going to use state, we're going to use effect. This is where I talk about the event listeners, where we add them and we have to clean them up when the component is destroyed. In this custom component, we are using the effect to watch the mouse moving. And once again, we don't use this, so we create a function of a variable handle mouse, which we're passing obviously the event because it's an event listener. And then we're setting mouse, which is now setting state. As you can see, I've destructured the state to be X and Y. We set it to 0 initially, and on the event listener we add, and we start watching the mouse. Now once we destroy the component, we should remove the mouse listener, and we no longer have access to the event listener. So over here, as you can see, I have this cool little bar over here. It says show mouse. I don't know how well everybody can see that. We have show mouse, and we have, so on click, we are going to display our new mouse tracking component. And we just added our event listener, and we just display 0 and 0. That's our X and Y coordinates because I have yet to move the mouse. So now we have added the mouse listener from our component. We are now live, and now we are now working. So now we have a new custom hook, use mouse, which is returning our X and Y value inside our mouse display component, which is using our custom use mouse hook, which is called, so mouse display is not shown unless show is true, which is button click and blah, blah, blah. So there you go. There's another, using state as a user interface, simple control, on click, make mouse display visible. So the use effect method is not triggered until the button is clicked and shown. Then the component is live and shows the use effect. So then, when we click this button again to say hide the mouse, we will destroy the component and run the cleanup effect from the use effect to remove the mouse listener from our application. And now we no longer have access to that data, that component, that hook is now dead, and it's been destroyed. And we've removed the event listener from the hook itself. Thought that was pretty nifty. Let's see here. Let me see. Oh, and Snoop's a crib, just to let everybody know. So I'm using local storage on the high score. I thought that was kind of fun. Overall, that is our hooks. The main, I really enjoy the use reducer hook because if anybody's used Redux before, it can be kind of an overwhelming process when you first initially start out using Redux. But for your state, it keeps everything much more in line and in tune. And once you get used to the workflow, it's very simple. And use state itself uses the reducer under the hood. So you might as well, if you're doing any, especially on context provider from across multiple components, you should use the reducer to ensure that you're returning the same state object across all components that you're providing it for. There's a few There's a few sites I want to tell everybody about before I get done here. Where are we at here? The next site, hooks. Yeah, usehooks.com is pretty interesting. So this has a whole lot of hooks on it that you can just use. I mean, people are writing hooks like crazy. There's so much to do. Theme providers, all kinds of just hooks and hooks. I mean, people have too much time on their hand to make all these hooks, I'm telling you. So I recommend checking that out if anybody actually does React and wants to look at hooks. I recommend that. All in all, I definitely, if you are doing React, I definitely recommend reading the Bible weekly. He usually puts them out on Sundays or so. And he is, this is Dan Abramoff, he is the man. If anybody's familiar with him. I am not, that's who I listen to. So I guess that's hooks in a nutshell, really. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah. So you said that the set state or the use state kind of replaces the component did mount.
No, use effect.
Use effect.
Use effect.
Component did mount. What are the other ones?
Component should unmount. Component did unmount. Which one? Will unmount and component should update.
Should update. Okay.
And that's pretty much what that array of use effect takes is that should update prop.
Now, how's the performance going to be on like a should update? You know, like sometimes you get, what I found in my experience, you can get into like some performance issues because a lot of things that are happening when they should be happening, and you're not really aware that's happening in the background until you really like get really into the weeds, right?
Right.
So I'm thinking about performance-wise, you know, how is that? Is it more performant? Is it less performant? They kind of go in the old way because otherwise you have should update. So you can try to check your state, and you got to check it and make sure, okay, should I actually update this? Otherwise, if you don't put it in there, then a lot of times you'll get results and it just kind of really slows things down.
Myself, I have used it. I have it like in two places. I'm using it in an application live, and they're not too deeply nested.
Right.
But I haven't seen any performance, anything fall off. I haven't had anything break regarding that. Performance-wise, I haven't really tested it otherwise because I'm trying to move away from all classes as it is. But I haven't run into that issue myself at this point.
Are you trying to stay more functional?
My idea is, my theory, the way React has become and the way React is going, I think everything should be tiny functional components everywhere. So almost like when I'm using this, watching the arrests for the use effect there, it really does only run that one time. Like if I put that console.log rendering, you'll see it'll run the one time until I get arrested, then it'll run again. So I haven't really run into any issues regarding that situation yet. But I'm sure I will.
Right. Well, and so what version is the hooks?
They officially released in 16.8.
16.8?
I think we're like 16.8.6 or something, or 16.8.7 right now. So I'm waiting for Suspense and Lazy to come out myself, but you know, they're taking their time. Sir?
Do you have any experience with the use reducer, but making it asynchronous?
No, I've not really played with the asynchrony of use reducer yet myself. I'm pretty fresh to the whole Redux reducer itself.
Right.
Bruno needs
Async.
Hmm?
Use reducers only sync. So you want to pair that with use effect if you want those async updates.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Anybody else?
How do we find you on GitHub? You have GitHub?
Do you really, I mean, do you want to look at my boring code? I mean, I'm not, it's not worth it.
He just want to learn about the gang life as well.
Oh, is that it?
I know about research into that.
Yeah. Scott May 2020 is my GitHub if you want to.
Well, no, how do we get in touch? Like, if we wanted to ask questions.
I'm on Orlando Devs.
Okay.
Orlando Devs.
You want to get those slides up?
My phone number is 904.
Are you good with the slides up?
I guess. Sure. I mean, do you really want to see those slides? I mean, I didn't really. I mean,
Spent effort on it, right?
not really. No. I put more effort in. Not really. No. Just text. I mean, watch out for my design. I don't have your design skills. I'm lacking that.
That's true.
Thank you. And yes.
So at this point, would you ever need VDOS libraries if you're using context API?
They say yes. They say yes, so I'm going to say yes. Because Redux is beyond me, and it's really beyond the scope. It's really for a global state. This is really a context provider of the children nested inside.
Okay.
So, in theory, I think you should be able to, because really, I think the only global state you really need, well, what I'm working with is like an auth. So really, everything else is really a provider inside itself. But Redux is really heavy duty to global state management. So,
Yeah, then your.
not yet.
Your backend stores to your Redux, you know, a lot of that goes into it. I'm just trying to think, like, if I was gonna go with this, like, how would that, because I do use Redux, it's like, you know, am I gonna try and drop one, am I gonna try to use them both, and then that's a little confusing.
I'm using Redux with the hooks.
Are you?
Yeah, so you just have to wrap your connect around the function, pass your props, the map state props, all the
Right.
same. So I mean, there's really, I don't have it up here yet, but I haven't noticed any difference using the functional component of anything from the Redux store. I have multiple components already using that, so I haven't noticed any.
So you're just using it like, so if you got like a functional component and you just say, okay, well, I just wanna, this particular component, I do need some state, and I need some, and I need some context, or whatever it may be, right? Just for that component, you don't have to like push it across all your functional components.
Right, exactly. The way I look at React, it should all be almost just inside its own, like, everything's just, that's my theory, when you have multiple components inside a component, you know, everything should be just tiny. Buttons are by themselves, everything's by
I
itself.
agree, because the problem is passing the props down to the
Exactly.
components. Once you get down to third level, it's just, it becomes
Yes,
a pain in the.
exactly. That's why I like the context provider, because it's keeping simple stateful logic across, exactly like you said. Now I can go to the third level, deeply nested, use context, and really just destructure the object for what I need. I don't even need to take anything else out. Anything else? All right. Thank you.
Thanks, man. So we're gonna take a quick restroom break, and if anybody's interested in presenting a lightning talk, other than 20. So yeah, if anybody's interested, come talk to either me or Bruno. Yeah, quick break, and then we'll resume. Start with the lightning talks. We have 2 lightning talks. If anyone else is interested, there's still subs. There's still names, mustard as well. So the first one's going to be Alex. Darren, you sure to represent? All right, cool.
Okay.
Let's go for it.
So yeah, I built this project about a month ago, and I just wanted to show it off because I'm proud of it. It's in Vue.js, I know, I'm sorry, and in Laravel. And so yeah, here it is. It's playbattleroyale.com. Because of the success of Fortnite, Apex, and what are the other ones? Blackout, PUBG, H1Z1. Yeah, so, and it's a Twitch clip aggregator. It pulls from the Twitch API every 5 minutes on a cron job, and then it pulls about 600 clips every 5 minutes. And there's currently about 25,000 clips in the database. And I built Ajax search with instant suggestions. And then there's a search page. And then you can go to the Twitch. You can click on any clip. And it just pulls an iframe. I guess, whatever, it doesn't matter. But yeah, and if you're logged in, you can comment on the clip. And you can submit a clip. You just put a Twitch URL, and then that's it. Oh yeah, I'll show you the landing pages too.
Let me ask you a question. How are you storing the database? Are you storing just like the URLs?
I'm storing all the API responses I get from Twitch, which doesn't give me very much data, so I can't even put ads on the site because they only give me so much. But it's a pretty good API.
What's your back into it? Is it Mongo?
MySQL and Laravel. Yep.
Do you have to log in to submit a clip? Or?
You can submit a clip without logging in.
Okay.
Yep. And,
Wrong answer, sir.
I don't have to worry about like inappropriate content because Twitch handles all that. I'm not storing the videos. So yeah, it's coming from the Twitch API. All the clips are coming from the Twitch API. So I don't have to worry about illegal content. So yeah. And then one more.
Do they throttle you in the API?
Not too bad, not too much actually. I haven't run into any rate limiting, but I think they give you like 30 requests per minute, or something like that. So it's pretty reasonable.
Can you sort by like rated or views?
And I don't have any sort filters yet, but that's something I would like to add. And would be pretty easy with the sizable database I have now. So yeah, and it is fully responsive.
How well did you know Vue beforehand?
I have been playing with Vue for probably a year.
How do you like it compared to the other?
Yeah, Vue is very simple. It's a good one to start with, and a lot of startups are using it, but React is used in my company and in a lot of big companies. So
is this a Laravel project and you're using Vue components?
Yep, Laravel and Vue on the front end. Laravel is a back end.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Laravel has a really tight integration, like a good integration with Vue, right?
Yep, it does.
It comes with a default component, a Vue component.
Yeah, Vue is the default, but it does have, when you're setting up a Laravel project, you can specify React instead if you want. So yeah, that's it.
Awesome, nice.
How do we get on the website?
It's playbattleroyale.com.
Awesome.
And then there's also like 3 other domains, battleroyale.site, Fortnite.live, and fortin.it. Yeah.
How did you deploy it? Like, what steps did you
I used Laravel has a product called Forge. Yep, that's what I used. And it interfaces with DigitalOcean. So like, yeah. Thank you.
Hey all, just had a couple of quick questions because this is my first time at this particular meetup, and I just wondered, like, raise your hand if you use React, like at your job or on a daily basis. Raise your hand if you are at least familiar with React. Okay, cool. Yeah, right. I just wanted to like get the feel for how popular it was among the broader JavaScript community. Is Vue used at all? You know, besides. Oh, really? And do we have Angular developers here? A couple. All right, noted. Cool. That's kind of just all I wanted to know.
Are you trying to pick one to?
Yeah. So just if I do a talk, I want to know my audience.
Oh, cool.
So. Cool. Wasn't really a talk. Just a question.
Oh, just update on some stuff. All right. Okay. Here we go. Okay, I just need to make sure that we got this going.
You need a microcontroller for this?
Oh, that would probably help, but where should we go? All right. This is how I'm streaming to the site, so it's kind of... All right, so let me see. So that's what is streaming, yada, yada, yada. Awesome, cool. Yeah, some more stuff. All right, cool. So hi, I'm Dwayne. Carlos talking about you earlier. So I do a bunch of different like side projects and things. So one of them, in addition to the otech.events, is a thing I did called Chill Hop. And so what it is, it's pretty much just, anybody familiar with the Pomodoro technique? Where you do like 25 minutes, 5-minute break, 15 minutes, 25, 5 minutes. All right, so I just kind of created something. And so thing is, the first version was using a SoundCloud like API thing. And as you know, SoundCloud and APIs, it's not great. So I'm kind of recreating it. And so, anybody familiar with Bandcamp? Okay, cool guys, cool. Bandcamp is like awesome. So as you can see, I'm a pretty big fan of it. This is like my account, so I just mad stuff I just buy off of there. So it's kind of, it's like, how would you say, it's like almost like a social media, independent artist kind of thing where they sell their music, and it's pretty awesome. So what I'm going to do is, I know a bunch of different artists there, because I also have a radio show that I do on Saturdays called Our Show. And so what I'm planning on doing is reaching out to different artists and different producers, and then creating like a back end for Chill Hop, so that they'll be able to add their Bandcamp tracks to it. So instead of relying on like SoundCloud and the API that's not changing, then it'll be a wide variety of more tracks and different artists and things. So that's the plan for that. So if anybody checks out the Chill Hop, it's like I'm doing the 2.0. So if you have any feedback or anything, if you happen to check it out, just hey@dwayne.io. If you don't know how to spell Dwayne, I also bought lifelong.dev. So hopefully that's a little bit easier to remember. And again, the site otech.events. The video should be up right when this is over on YouTube, so you'll be able to watch it. So it has a bunch of different, I probably did like 5 different events so far. So if you're interested in Vue, back-end stuff, Orlando, all type of things. So I try to go to different events and record stuff, so people that can't make it can watch. I did something.
What do you do back to the maps?
Oh, okay, yeah, so this is just, people can actually, this is for my radio show.
Yeah.
So these are different listeners. So like people, so you probably won't be able to hear it, but people are kind of able to.
Is that just Google Places API?
No, it's actually okay. It's what I did because you can actually like add yourself to it, and you can take pictures of yourself and add. You can actually locate yourself. It's a lot of random stuff. But yeah, it's just Google Maps, and I store the different locations that people add themselves, and it just adds themselves to the map. And when you refresh, when you refresh, it actually kind of goes through the map of all the people. I built it in Angular like a while ago, like when Angular just came out. I originally built it in Angular JS, and then like 3 weeks later, Angular came out. Like, oh, so I had to, and so it's loading the map. I also created like this custom player here, and then you can this thing, RIP Google Plus. I'm trying to talk about the show, and so you can actually skip through stuff. These are all the tracks I played. I do a live playlist of the tracks, and I take like little Instagram videos to post to Instagram so people can kind of hear what I'm playing. And then I capture the image from them, and I use them as like little placeholders. So you can skip through the tracks, and it shows who's playing. But yeah, so here's just people that add themselves to the map, and they kind of just go.
So those are real people that.
Yeah, I wouldn't make that up. And then what's cool, you can hit, like,